Alright, everyone. So, it appears that before, there actually seemed to be at least one person who asked me to continue. I'm not sure about everyone else, as at this point there's no likes or dislikes. But, yeah, so one person wants me to continue. I guess there might be some more. I don't know. In any case, I'm going to be reading Chapter 2 of The Age of Wings and Steel. So, yeah, I might also do 3. I guess we'll just have to find out. In any case, let us begin.
Blue Blood, this is madness. We stand on the brink of war and you would have us abandon our only protection?
War? There is no war. You're mad for power, Duchess, and you'd sacrifice all our lives to get it.
You're a fool, Duke Blue Blood. The kingdom of Griffa sits on our southern border, biding its time. The military is 10 times the size of ours. We need to build up our forces. We need to reinforce the fortress of Selpaloth, not remove what few guards remain. It's the only defense our borders have against the Griffins.
It's been 50 years since the Griffins took the Southlands. There's nothing to suggest they have any interest in expanding further north. That fortress is a symbol of hostility. If we continue to march armed guards across their borders, then we might very well start a war. Duchess Belle, your attempts to fortify your own landholdings are shamelessly transparent to every pony in this council.
The Duchy of Whitetail is the only thing standing between you and the Griffin army, Blue Blood. You'll change your tune soon enough when an ocean of griffins washes over the south, burning Equestria to the ground.
Your warmongering has no place here, Duchess.
You would have us roll over on our backs and hide under a rock.
Princess Celestia, the alicorn who ruled the kingdom of Equestria, had had enough.
Counselors, please, remain civil, or I will have you both escorted out.
The council chamber rustled. A huge circular room at the base of the Castle of the Sun in Canterlot. The chamber was carpeted in red, with 30 seating cushions set around a circular table. The chamber was normally empty. Today, however, it was filled with representatives from each of Equestria's duchies and provinces. The council was in session, which these days meant a screaming match, Celestia reflected sadly. Emmett Blueblood and Celerity Bell were at each other's throats as usual, and the rest of the council was dividing between their camps before her eyes. Celestia shifted in her throne. We have held the garrison at Selpaloth since the fall of the Griffin Empire. I am loath to abandon it without cause, Duke Blueblood.
But your highness, the Griffins see that fortress as an insult. Removing the garrison would be a gesture of peace, an offering of friendship given freely.
Celerity Bell could not contain herself, and taken freely, no doubt, followed by the Whitetail Fortress in the southern plains. Celestia's eyes glinted with steel.
Celerity, that is enough!
The white unicorn quailed under her princess's gaze, mumbling an apology. Duke Emmett Blueblood leaned forward, clapping a hoof on the table.
Duchess Belle wants to jot every last pony in Equestria into the army to fight a phantom, your highness. Her real intentions are plain. To fortify her own lands in the south, and to grab as much power as she can from this council and your own sovereignty.
Duchess Celerity Bell growled.
Griffa is hardly a phantom. They've been taking more and more territory non-stop for the last century. The population is out of control. They need to expand, or they'll all starve. I intend to make sure that they don't do so right into our homeland.
Blueblood gestured with a hoof.
So let us broker peace with the Griffins. Ally yourselves with them and to benefit both of our nations.
The Duchess scoffed.
Go ahead and try. The Griffins don't want allies. They want land and slaves.
The male unicorn narrowed his eyes.
And you think we should drive them to war over this?
Celestia motioned for the councilor ponies to be silent.
Clearly this issue is larger than the fate of a single fortress.
She turned wearily to the rest of the council. I think we're done for today. This council is adjourned. We will begin again tomorrow at 9 o'clock sharp. Good night. The council grumbled angrily. The lesser duchies and provinces were already starting to fragment along the lines of Blueblood and Bell had drawn. The fight over Selpaloth was just round and +1 of the political battle between the Norhart and Whitetail duchies. The entire situation was a powder keg, and Celestia had to watch her every step in the volatile political climate. The ponies stood and began to file out of the chamber. Celestia watched them go, tired from a long day of listening to their bickering. As the last few counselors vanished through the door, she stood up from her throne and yawned. She turned to the royal guard pony at her side.
Inger, would you please bring a cup of tea to my quarters?
Of course, Your Majesty.
The faithful fire-wing guard bowed deeply and cantered off in the direction of the castle kitchen. Celestia dearly wanted to sleep, but she still had work to do. The most unpleasant work she had ever experienced. The work she did every night. Celestia climbed the castle stairs with a heavy heart. The stones seemed dim and grimy, though naturally they were cleaned to perfection by the castle's caretakers. No, thought Celestia, the real darkness was in her mind. In my heart. She reached the top of the stairs after an eternity, swinging open the door with her magic. She stepped out onto the roof, the small circle of stone at the very peak of her castle. She gazed into the west, watching the sun descend towards the horizon. As the last few vestiges of pink stained the sky, Celestia closed her eyes and focused all her divine power on one task. Slowly, from the east, a pale white orb rose from beneath the horizon. Lovingly detailed with craters and pockmarks, the greatest of her sister's works ascended into the sky to begin the night. It was beautiful, as always. Celestia's vision swam through tears.
Oh, Luna.
312 years, 2 months, 5 days, 13 hours, and 11 minutes. Exactly. Time had never dulled the pain. Her sister was up there, somewhere, imprisoned on that white sphere, isolated, starving, alone, and perhaps wholly repentant. She couldn't know. Celestia would give anything to bring back her sister, to rule together as they had once done in ages. But that feat was beyond her knowledge.
Luna, I need your help. The kingdom stands ready to tear itself apart, with the griffins ready to gobble up the pieces. Please, Luna, be with me in spirit, if not in body.
She gave a shuddering sigh, then turned back to the stairs to take her rest until the raising of the sun. Alright, so that is chapter 2, and, well, you know what, I can still do it. I'll do chapter 3. Alright, so let's get going. The smell of fresh baking bread wafted into Rye's room from the bakery below. He inhaled the scent, smiling. Throwing off his sheets and yawning, he dragged himself out of bed. Looking out his window, he saw the city of Canterlot spread out before him. The thatched roofs and smoking chimneys gave the city a homey air. Above the city, on the side of the great mountain, the castle of the sun jutted out. Its parapets and spires glittered like gold in the sun's warm light. He'd never been inside. Maybe someday, after he figured out whatever he was going to do with his life now that... Rye grimaced. He turned away from the window. Oh, my head hurts. Clearly, the second bottle of wine in last night's quest to drown his sorrows had been a mistake. The Salt Lick, Canterlot's most popular tavern, was notorious for the strength of its alcohol, but he hadn't been in much of the mood to care. He stumbled across the room to a standing mirror. Staring at it, Rye fought with his emotions and a killer hangover. His hair was a tangled mess, still ruined from yesterday's fiasco. He normally fluffed it up as much as possible, letting his hair cover the horn. That way, if he kept his wings folded, he could pass as a simple Pegasus and avoid the stares. He looked down at the small wooden brush he used to comb his bushy mane. Maybe today was different? Or the shot, anyway. Rye stared at the brush, gritting his teeth in determination. Come on, work! His horn glowed orange like a soft, dim flare. Rye closed his eyes. He concentrated harder on the brush, opening himself to the magic like his father had taught him. The magic was like a cool, flowing river. It pervaded everything, everywhere, a constant presence that Rye had never been able to truly connect with. It was always there, he could feel it, but he just couldn't touch it. It was like reaching up to a tree for an apple, only to have the branch pull away. Straining harder, his horn glowed brilliantly, shooting off orange sparks. Rye groaned at the exertion. His eyes snapped open. The brush remained resolutely still. Abruptly, he let go of the magic, letting its cool flow dissipate. The light display pettered out, and he stood in his room breathing heavily. He grabbed the brush in his mouth and flung it as hard as he could at the mirror, It shattered, sending shards of glass everywhere.
Ah!
There was a flurry of footsteps on the stairs and a frantic knock on his door. His mother's muffled voice came through.
Rye? Rye, are you all right?
I'm fine, Mom. I'm fine, Rye said, exhausted. He pulled open the door with his mouth, staring glumly at his mother's concerned expression. Knocked my mirror over. Accident. He pushed past her without looking. Winstreak followed wordlessly, her face still strained. On the lower level of the house, the bakery was open for business. Apricot Strudel, baker and cook extraordinaire, was packing a set of loaves for a customer. That'll be 12 bits, please. The bright yellow pony reached into her saddlebags and pulled out the money. Thanks, Mr. Strudel. She grabbed the bag and trotted out of the store, ringing the bell attached to the door. Apricot smiled and placed the money beneath the counter. He turned and saw his son, and his face beamed. Rye! Good morning, or, afternoon. Rye winced. How many drinks did I have last night? Too many, said his mother, with a disapproving frown. I realize you were upset, sport, but please try to show a little more common sense. Rye nodded with a grimace. I'd like some coffee if we have any. Right away. I'll be back in a minute. Apricot bustled off to his kitchen. Rye looked blearily around the shop, the little home his family had lived in since before he was born. The familiar grain of the wood was comforting. Maybe he could be a baker. Why had he never considered following in his father's footsteps? He craned his head to stare at his cutie mark. He waggled his rump, watching the little olive branch imprinted on his flank dance. Olives, huh? Suppose I could try cooking. His mother had said he was a terrible chef, but that didn't count. She'd been spoiled for many years by his father. No, I can lie to them, but I can't lie to myself. He was no cook. He wanted to serve like his mother, to defend Equestria against her enemies. That is, if Equestrian even had enemies. The kingdom had been at peace for well over 100 years, but there was no honor or glory in baking bread. Rye's train of thought was interrupted by Apricot arriving with a cup of steaming coffee. Oh, sweet medicine. Thanks, Dad. Rye gingerly took the cup and drowned the entire thing in one gulp. Apricot smiled at him. You're welcome, son. And when you're ready to talk, so are we. Apricot and Winstring both looked at their son with the same parental love in their eyes. Rye put on his false smile and nodded. I'm going to go to the market today, I think. I'll see you both later. Rye pushed open the door, jangling the bell. The door slid shut and Rye vanished into the city. He didn't take any money with him, said Apricot with a nervous frown. He'll be all right, dear. Just give him some time. The Canterlot Market was the largest in the northern half of Equestria, topped only by the famous Great Bazaar in the South Provinces. There were stalls for everything: food, books, traveling, equipment, even weapons and armor. Rye wandered aimlessly past the vendors, listening to them advertise their wares. Fresh apples, all the way from sweet apple acres in the Western Min Province. We got little oddities from all over the world. Come and look at our fine selection of Griffin antiques and slave Nordic carvings. That's right, straight from the snowy Northlands. Fine spears and hoof maces for sale. You won't find a better made selection in all Equestria. Got hoof rot? Suffer from a bad case of tail mang? Going bald before your time? Stop in and check out our collection of cure-alls to fix what ails you. Rye walked past them all, taking in the vast collection of goods. They sold everything any pony could ever want. Rye wasn't after any of that. He couldn't buy his way into the service. Something caught his eye. A bright peony pink pony with curly yellow hair was standing at one of the stalls. Rye smiled and walked up behind her. Are these really all the way from Sleipnord? She was saying. Oh, aye, said the vendor, displaying a collection of small wooden figurines. Very difficult to get these days. What with the Nord ponies turning back travelers at the border. They're worth quite a few bits, but I think I could cut you a deal, miss. His eyes were full of money. The pink pony tapped her chin with her hoof. If these are authentic, why are they made out of rowan wood? Rowan trees don't grow that far up north. The shopkeeper blinked. Well, see, sometimes caravans bring up wood from down here in Equestria for construction, the pink pony interrupted. But the Nord ponies don't let anyone in through Mordthal pass anymore. It's been sealed since the last great war against Helvingshire. She stared evenly at the shopkeeper. Clearly confounded by the lore-verse pony in front of him, the vendor stuttered, Taking pity on the vendor, Rai said, "Cranberry?" The pink pony turned and started in surprise. "Oh, Rai, it's so good to see you!" She jumped on him and hugged tightly. She pulled her head back. I heard about yesterday." He grimaced. "The news is spreading around that quickly?" Cranberry blushed. "Well, I didn't hear the story, really. Just a rumor that during the recruitment test yesterday, a weird that a pony had, royally botched the test and humiliated himself in front of half of Canterlot," Rai finished dryly. "Well, not as such, but yes. And since you're the only winged and horned pony I know," Cranberry shrugged apologetically, "I haven't been spreading around if it makes you feel better." Rai sighed. "Not really, but thanks anyway, Cranberry." "Don't whine, Rai." He would not bleed on Cranberry. He changed the subject. "So, what are you doing out in the market today?" Cranberry's eyes lit up. "Ooh, I'm looking for new items for my collection," she guessed enthusiastically. "I already found this amazing statuette of Frogmarn, the High Dragon, that I'm pretty sure is actually from Wormgrand. And you know how hard things are from the Dragonlands are to find these days." Rai smiled as Cranberry babbled on about her antiques. She could always be found with a book on ancient Griffin architecture or the tombs of the Camel Kings or some other tome of ancient civilizations. It was endearing, like a history-obsessed puppy. "Ooh, I'd just love to go to some of those places someday. Think about it, Rai. Adventuring across the world, exploring the deep caves, seeing distant lands and meeting creatures we've never seen before." Rai grinned. Cranberry Sugar, wandering archaeologist. He raised a hoof and gestured grandly. "Galloping across the lands, fending off manticores and trolls by throwing textbooks at them." "Now you're making fun of me," Cranberry pouted. Rai smirked. "I'm serious, Rai. Think of how much fun it would be to travel for a while." The vendor, by now extremely annoyed, leaned forward. "Look, lady, are you going to buy anything?" Cranberry looked at him and sniffed. "No, I don't think so. I only buy real artifacts, thank you." Ryan Cranberry left the vendor bitterly muttering something to himself about rowanwood and keeping merchandise shelves. They trotted off again through the market. "So, Rai," asked Cranberry, suddenly serious, "what are you going to do now?" He shrugged. "Who knows?" His earlier thoughts came back to him. "Maybe I'll take up the family business. My father's always trying to get me into cooking. At least then he could stay in the kitchen, away from the staring eyes of all the customers." The thought made him ill. "I suppose I'll find something." The corners of Cranberry's mouth curled teasingly. "I can't see you making bread for a living, Rai." Her ears perked up. "Oh, look! Jensen's is open!" She bounced off in the direction of a market stall, Rai trailing behind her. Jensen, an utterly purple earth pony, nodded to the two as they arrived. "Hello, Miss Sugar." "Hello, Jensen. Got anything new?" Cranberry looked around at this selection of ancient artwork and manuscripts. Oh wait, no, she's old, isn't she? Yeah. The purple pony said, "Afraid not, Miss Sugar. I haven't gotten any new shipments in from outside Equestria this month. Getting wares over the borders isn't as easy as it used to be." She looked around conspiratorially. "But I do have a selection of maps that I don't think you've seen." Cranberry's face lit up. "Yes, please. Let's have a look at them." Rai groaned. "Cranberry, you have to have the entire world in maps by now. Do you really need another one?" She hushed him. "Ah, there we go." Jensen plucked a stack of scrolls down on the stall window. "Take your pick." As Cranberry rifled through the maps, making the occasional, Rai hit up Jensen for news. "So, Jensen, you're always got an ear to the ground. What's the latest word from around the kingdom?" The old pony frowned. "These are dangerous times, Mr. Strudel. The roads are falling into disrepair. Goblins and trolls roam the Northlands with impunity. Even the Great Road isn't as safe as it was 10 years ago. And," she lowered her voice, "they say the Griffins are on the move again. There are whispers of armies in the south, hundreds of campfires that cover the sun with smoke." Rai sucked in his breath. "What about the other lands?" "Not much to tell, thankfully," said Jensen. "Wormgrand is still shut off from the rest of the nations. They've been avoiding contact with us for centuries. To be honest, I'm glad. Dragons are nothing but trouble. She looked darkly at the west. Beyond the horizon lay the ominous Drakengard Mountains, standing solemnly between the land of the ponies and the arid realm of the fire-breathing lizards.
Ah, and here's one I don't have,
exclaimed Cranberry. She pointed a hoof at the map.
How much?
For you, Miss Sugar?
Jensine smiled.
2 bits.
Cranberry dropped a few coins into the counter and swept her map into one of her saddlebags.
Thanks again, Jensine.
Stop by any time, dear.
Rye and Cranberry walked off again.
Listen, Rye, I've got to run. I'm supposed to meet Potluck in 10 minutes. She'll kill me if I'm late again, said Cranberry apologetically.
Her sister's fiery reputation was well known to Rye. I'll see you later then, he said. He watched as the pink pony melted into the crowd of shoppers and disappeared. Well, time to find another friend to talk to. But you don't need another friend for that. But you'd need another friend for that, wouldn't you? Rye frowned. He cantered away from the market, trying to find something to do. He had all the time in the world, after all. The others are probably getting fitted for armor right now, or sitting in the barracks bragging to each other about their times on the exam. Or, Rye shook his head. No good thinking about it. He let his host carry him away. He found himself approaching the city wall, a great half-circle of stone extending out of the side of the mountain. It encircled the town that had grown up in the shadow of the castle, providing a modicum of safety for all the denizens of Canterlot. No foe had ever breached the wall, none had even tried since the Great War with the Griffin Empire nearly 600 years ago. Rye passed through the massive gates, avoiding the traffic of merchants and travelers entering the city. The foothills of the Jotur Mountains spread out before him, the long road from Canterlot disappearing into the rolling landscape. Rye set out down the road, taking in the crisp autumn air. The sun rolled lower into the sky as his host carried him along the path. Slowly it began to turn south, heading for the crossroads many miles away, where it met with the great road, the long path that led all the way from Whitewall City to the Duchy of Whitetail, to the Mid-Rothal Pass in the north. The path passed by the tiny Contail Wood. Rye abruptly turned left and abandoned the main road. Entering the little 60-acre forest, the rest of the world disappeared. He listened to the birds singing in the trees as he trotted along. Finally, he saw his destination. A small tree stump in the center of a clearing. Rye took a deep breath, enjoying the scent of the forest. The golden red leaves of the tree swayed gently in the afternoon breeze, a few rays of sunlight illuminating the clearing. Rye sat down on his stump and looked around. He'd found this place years ago, in a mad flight from a particularly nasty childhood bully. Rye had run and run and run, trying to escape the taunts, getting lost in the forest. Blinded by tears, he stumbled into this hidden glade. He had fallen asleep, lost and scared. When the morning came, Rye had somehow found his way out of the forest and returned home to his worried parents. He'd never forgone the glade, though. Ever since, he'd used this place to find peace and solace. He thought back to the imaginary adventures he had played out in the glade. Struck by a sudden childish urge, Rye stood on his hind legs and gestured with his hooves. "Fear not, fair maiden, I shall save you from the foul dragon." He waved an imaginary hoof mace, fending off the beast. "Aha! You cannot defeat the master warrior, Rye Strudel!" He cavorted around the clearing, slaying fiends from his childhood. Laughing like a mad pony, he fought griffins and dragons and chimeras for the glory of the princess. Exhausted, he collapsed into his stump, still giggling like a fowl. Rye curled up and closed his eyes. Even as a child, he'd wanted to emulate his mother's brave deeds of daring do, like the adventures of Firewings she always talked about. But now, what was he to do? He sighed, still curled up in his stump. The sun was warm and comforting. Rye blinked. He lifted his head, looking around. The glade was dark, and night had clearly fallen hours ago. He yawned, stretching his wings and hooves. How long had he been asleep? His parents likely thought he'd been at the tavern again. Rye shook his head, trying to clear his sleep-muddled brain. Well, it was probably time to head back to the city. Snap! Rye's head whirled. His eyes darted around the trees, looking for the source of the noise. He heard a winded gasp and leapt off his stump to investigate. Rye snuck out of the glade deeper into the forest. He saw a flash of purple in the distance. What was some pony doing in the forest this late at night? Rye's curiosity was piqued. He chased after the purple pony, trying to stay as quiet as he could. His quarry suddenly paused, gasping raggedly. Rai snuck closer, trying to get a better look. It was a female unicorn with dull pink hair, a lavender coat, and a brown cape draped over her back. Her saddlebag bore a familiar symbol, a scroll with a seal in the shape of a sun. What is a royal courier doing in Contail Woods? The unicorn regained control of her breathing. She lifted her head, looking over her back with a wary expression. Rai held his breath. Had she spotted him? She turned to keep running and ran smack into something neither of them had seen. Before her stood a tall, four-legged creature. Rai couldn't tell what it was, for it wore a heavy cloak and hood that concealed all features. It clearly wasn't a pony, though, as it raised its front legs to reveal a sharp claw. The creature spoke. Her voice was raspy and threatening. End of the line, equestrian, the purple unicorn gasped, then turned to run. Another one of the cloaked things emerged from the trees, blocking her way. She growled, planting her hooves in a fighting stance. Rai watched, transfixed. The purple pony's horn glowed brightly, her lips curling back into a snarl. The two cloaked things pounced as one, their claws coming up and shining in the faint light. The air shimmered, and a violet barrier of magic snapped into the air around the pony. The two creatures bounced off, recoiling. The unicorn released the barrier and made a run for the thicker woods. The first creature charged into her path, but her horn burned a fiery violet and the creature flew towards the tree with a crack. The second creature jumped the pony from behind, raking its claws down her back and shredding her cape. The unicorn let out a gasp of pain. She bucked her back legs hard, catching the thing in the midsection. It doubled over, wheezing. The unicorn turned back to flee, but the first creature was already on her. She rolled to avoid his claws, her tattered cape trailing behind her. She came up from the roll on her feet, her horn glowing and her eyes narrowed. She twisted her head, and the creature flew to the side. It caught itself by digging its claws into the ground, swinging around and catching the pony with a blow from its hind legs. She stumbled to the ground, the light from her horn flickering. The second cloaked thing rejoined the fight, its hideous-shaped claws slicing through the air towards the unicorn. She rolled away and up again, but failed to find her balance. The first creature slammed into her from the side, and the second moved in for the kill. It caught the pony's neck in one claw, lifting her into the air. The creature stood on its hind legs, raising itself to a full height of nearly 2 meters. The unicorn dangled helplessly, bloodied and bruised. The creature drew back its free claw, and as it did so, its hood fell from its head. Rai gasped. The creature's head was sharp, angular, and feathered. He'd never seen one before, but he knew that he was looking at a griffin. Helpless, he watched as the bird lion slashed its claw across the unicorn's belly. He found himself racing from his hiding place into the clearing. Hey! Leave her alone! The griffin's head whirled. The de-hooded one's eyes sharpened. It looked at its companion, who shook its head. No witnesses. It released the wounded unicorn, dropping it to all fours. Rai's charge faltered as the two griffins moved to flank him. Struck with sudden inspiration, Rai reared up, kicking his front legs into the air. He reached into his magic, casting the only spell he could manage. His horn lit up with a brilliant orange glow. He flared his wings and yelled wordlessly, Ha! The two griffins were dumbstruck. In the dark gloom of the night, a strange pony of a breed they had never seen before had emerged in the middle of their silent mission to challenge them. The bright shine of his horn indicated a magic user, and a mage with wings was something frightening and strange. The first griffin hissed something at him. Krishnika! Rai didn't understand the griffin language, but the creature bared their talons in a message that was very clear. The two spread apart, moving toward him from both sides. Oh, this might have been a bad idea. As Rai fell down onto his hooves, he crept backwards slowly. His horn's light still illuminated the foreigners before him. The griffin on his right crouched and moved closer. This might have been a very, very bad idea. The one on his left moved suddenly, and as Rai jolted away, the first one pounced. He had a moment to take in the sharp claw coming straight at his face before the griffin was suddenly whisked away. A purple light shone through the clearing. The griffin went flying into a tree with a resounding snap. It fell to the ground limply. The unicorn, still somehow alive and fighting, stood up, her eyes ablaze. The remaining griffin hissed at the ponies in its strange bird-like tongue. Outnumbered and outgunned, it showed the safest option left available. The griffin raced to his fallen companion, lifting it delicately onto its back, and vanished into the night. The unicorn courier's horn flickered and died, and she collapsed again. She lay very still. Rai stood shakily, his horn's light fizzling out. He panted, still frozen with fear. If she hadn't saved him, he'd be a goner. What had he been thinking, charging in like that? His terrified thoughts were interrupted by a low moan. The unicorn! Not dead! Rai raced to her side, kneeling down beside the fallen courier. Are you all right? He asked, looking over her wounds. His face fell, seeing bloody streaks on her back and chest. She gave another moan and curled up, her face set with pain. I don't have any medicine. I'll go for help. No, too late. The unicorn's voice was soft and weak. No time. She clenched her teeth and panted, her chest heaving. Who are you? Her deep purple eyes gazed into Rai's. He felt as if she was staring into his mind. Rai Strudel. I'm from Canterlot. What's your name? Rai cringed at how banal he sounded, in light of the unicorn's mortal, he feared, wounds. Dawn. She closed her eyes with a sharp gasp. Sparkle. Her eyes snapped open and she raised her head. Listen to me. Open my saddlebag. Rai obeyed, unhooked the flap from the bag and reaching his mouth inside. He withdrew a tightly bound scroll, stamped with the red seal of the princess. His eyes widened and he dropped the letter. That seal was reserved for documents of the utmost importance. Famine, treason, war. You must, Dawn coughed, the flecks of red staining the ground. She tried again, her voice suddenly full of iron. You must get message to Celestia. Every word took effort. Her head slowly sank. Fate of the kingdom. Must tell the princess. Failed my duty. But you can't. You can't. She began coughing again. Rai moved to help and she slapped his hoof away with her head. No time. Get it to the princess. Her eyes misted over. Dawn looked past Rai's head, staring at the night sky above. Tell her I'm sorry. Her head touched the ground gently, and her eyes closed for the last time. Rai watched helplessly as her breathing slowed and finally stopped. He sat on his haunches and looked at the dead unicorn before him. Dawn Sparkle. His eyes filled with tears. What horrors had this brave pony come through to deliver this message, only to fail so close to her destination? I'm sorry, Dawn. I don't know you very well, but you deserve better than this. Rai blinked. His vision was still full of water. He blinked again. He didn't have time to build a pyre or dig a grave. Clearly this message was more important than his or Dawn's life, and he felt she would want him to leave immediately. Still, he needed to do something for the unicorn who had saved his life. Rai rolled her onto her back and crossed her forelegs. He picked a nearby flower, a bright blue thing with beautiful petals. Cranberry would know what it was called, he thought, his mind still reeling from the night's events. He laid it on her chest, and draped her ragged cape over her body in lieu of a shroud. Goodbye, Dawn Sparkle. I won't let you down. Rai turned and galloped out of the forest. If he ran as fast as he could, he might be at the castle gates by sunrise. Alright, so that's it for chapter 2 and 3. Hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, so rate, I guess I'll go through this thing. Rate, comment, whatever, maybe subscribe if you seriously want to. Well, in any case, see ya.